Well, now that's done, what will we actually be talking about for this course? Well, of course, we'll be talking about death and mortality. Death as the event, mortality as the condition. That might be a good way to start. Death is what happens at the end of our lives. Mortality is the condition of being the kind of creature that can and will die. And I suppose any sort of philosophical approach to the subject of death will talk about both. And what I've done here, there's no need for me to go into every one of the week's materials. If you look, you'll see there's an instructor video, at least one for each week, and that's exactly what I do there. So whether you want to watch those first, or I would say probably better watch them after you've looked at the week's readings and other videos, the real texts or materials for the course, probably a better idea. But in that instructor video, you'll hear what I think the themes of each week are, and how each one of the readings relates to that theme, which is a loose theme, especially the first week. The first week, the idea is that we want to open up the conversation. Introductory attitudes towards death, general attitudes towards death, things that I found very striking and thought-provoking to get us thinking about the nature of death. Really classic texts like John Donne's poem, Death Be Not Proud, which is maybe one of the most famous things ever said about death, and a little bit of Ecclesiastes from the Old Testament on death. Very surprising, I would say, attitude to be found about death in the Bible. Just general attitudes towards death. Really, death as a god in the Game of Thrones world, as a force and a power. Death as nothing, as powerless, from John Donne's Christian attitude, and then death as, I don't know what you want to call it from Ecclesiastes, but certainly not a typical religious attitude, at least Judeo-Christian attitude towards death. Module 2, theories of death, which is really just, theories of what happens to us when we die. You might say an attempt to characterize the nature of death. 2 readings which say that death is an event that begins something else, from Plato and the Bhagavad Gita, and then Epicurus's famous idea that death is, he says death is nothing, but then again, so are we, according to Epicurus. So really theories of death, ideas of what happens to us when we die, how to characterize that. Week 3, a being towards death. There's really, you might say, really about mortality. Being towards death, as we'll see, is a famous expression that the philosopher Martin Heidegger uses to characterize human existence. That's how we should think of ourselves, or if we are telling the truth about ourselves. And we'll see what he says that in Simon Critchley's essay on Heidegger. And then the opposition to that by Paul Landsberg, a great 20th century Christian philosopher who explicitly denied Heidegger's idea. And then a poem by W.H. Auden, which I think is an interesting commentary in the same field about what the significance of death is. Week 4, Ways of Dying, is entirely scenes from movies. I'm very interested in the way that philosophy can be done in film, and I'm very interested, since I've been teaching this course, in the way that death has been represented, and usually, in a medium of film. It's not death so much as dying. And these are 3 incredible death scenes, which couldn't be any more different, which I think go a long way towards illustrating the different ways that we imagine the dying process and its significance within our lives. Sort of the big send-off of all that jazz, the despairing anguish of Jason Robards' wonderful performance in Magnolia, and then what might be called the ideal death, the main character in the film The Barbarian Invasions. It's very interesting. Module 5, week 5, will focus on the subject of grief, really how we deal with the deaths of others. The first 4 weeks are general approaches to death, but I think you might say it's more or less a dominant first-person view. My death. How do each of us view our own personal mortality? Week 5 is just one reading, rather strenuous reading, but definitely doable. And I've got some videos there, hopefully, to make the reading a little easier about the nature of grief. What is it that characterizes grief, as Gustafson would say, a distinct emotion that human beings experience at the death of a loved one. And then finally, in this short course, Module 6, Week 6, dealing with death. And again, this is sort of like significance of death in our lives. And I'm very interested in to what degree human beings can accept death, assimilate their own mortality into their lives, whether we can really come to terms with, I suppose, our own deaths. And there's very different viewpoints in Epictetus, Ernest Becker's Denial of Death, book written in the 70s, and a wonderful movie about death, I think, 1980s British gangster film called The Hit. And if you think, I hope that I justify these videos and what I have to say about them. I think they're all really incredibly interesting. So those are the themes. I mean, it is kind of a loosely organized course thematically. I think that especially an online course, we want to keep our subject matter manageable. At the same time, we want to have a course with some depth. So, I think that each one of these modules has a certain theme. And each one of these modules, I hope, gets us thinking. And that's one of the things I want to say about a philosophy course. Philosophy courses are not easy. The material that you're given in philosophy courses is very challenging, I think. Even a short reading of philosophy can be challenging. It's deceptively challenging because of the things you have to think about and come to terms with. This course is not really about amassing information. It's not about learning facts. I mean, there are very few facts in philosophy. Philosophy starts where the facts end. Facts are for history and science. And even then, it's not even sure exactly what a fact is in history and science. That's a philosophical question. I mean, philosophy is about raising questions. It's about thinking about things. And sure, philosophers give us answers, but they give us answers, that we have to think about. It's not about memorizing somebody's answer. It's about reading somebody and understanding them and thinking about what they said and then critically evaluating. So what I would like you in this course is to, come away with questions. Maybe questions that you've been carrying with you all your life. Maybe questions that are new to you. But that's what the life of philosophy is. It's about really, important questions, hopefully. And sure, I want you to write papers and give me I want you to demonstrate your insight into the materials that we look at. And I want you to argue for your positions. But I want you to maintain that open questioning attitude. Nothing could be more important to doing philosophy. And that's really why I chose the materials that I did. I think they're all very thought-provoking in that they raise really interesting questions. So, let's have fun. Let's learn something for this course. And it's really, really one of my favorite courses to teach, despite the disturbing nature of the subject matter. It actually is, I think, a fantastic course to take. So good luck, everyone. And I will be talking to you all soon.